Welcome back to Canadian Justice, where we're discussing polyamory and family law. Now, in the last segment, we were briefly talking about the difference between polyamory and polygamy. John Paul, is there anything you wanted to add on what people should know about the difference and if there is a difference?
Well, I mean, Michelle summarized it quite correctly. You know, the reality about polygamy is that that kind of relationship structure is not uncommon across the globe. Typically, these relationships are required by social norms or required by religious practice. So, in Canada, in the late 1880s, when the prohibitions on polygamy came into effect, it was a direct reaction to the expansion of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which held, a doctrine called celestial marriage, in which multiple marriages were a requirement of the religion. And then, we saw that really, come to a head in the early part of this millennium when the BC Supreme Court heard a case involving the practice of polygamy being carried out by the fundamentalist church in Bountiful. And one of the issues that were directly identified in that was indeed the exploitation of very young women, some of whom were girls, being married to much older men, the patriarchs of that community. But polyamory is none of those things. It's adults who make a free and informed choice to enter into a relationship being fully informed of the parameters of it. Those are relationships which you can choose to leave. They're certainly not compulsory. They're something that is really about a relationship orientation of the individual more than a requirement of society or religion.
So this is obviously a non-traditional religious structure, and people who want to have a family that's a polyamorous family are faced with different legal challenges than a man and a wife and his wife, or even common law spouses might be faced with. So let's talk about some of those challenges. Michelle, let's talk about just the basics of filing tax returns. If you're three people in a relationship, my husband and I, we file a joint return. Many people in marriages do, but what if you're in a polyamorous relationship? How does the CRA look at that?
Well, I actually don't have an answer to that. I did ask my accountant this question, and she said, "Well, that is a really good thing that I'd like to think through," but nothing like that has crossed my desk yet. So I think this is something that the CRA is going to have to grapple with, and probably is in some ways right now.
And John Paul, what about insurance benefits? When you have insurance through your employer, typically you can add your spouse or your partner as a onto your insurance plan for dental care, for prescription drugs. What about your polyamorous partner? If you're in a multiple person relationship, I assume you cannot add an additional partner. Do you think that it makes sense to limit it to just one person? Otherwise, our insurance premiums would be impacted, or do you think that the insurance industry needs to adapt?
Well, the reason why we're having this discussion at all is really about the fact that all of the laws in Canada and in all of its provinces and territories, are written on the implicit assumption that important long-term adult relationships only come in pairs of people. And that's where we start hitting all these walls. The legislation on wills and estates talks about your spouse in the singular. It doesn't contemplate that you might have more than one person who might qualify as a spouse. As far as insurance programs are concerned, well, it's really only until the last couple of decades that people who identify as polyamorous have begun being open about their relationships. So quite understandably, the average insurance company, whether it's a public company or a private company, thinks about important adult relationships as only coming in pairs. So you, as the employee, get extended health and dental benefits. Well, who is your spouse that you're going to nominate as a beneficiary? So the problem you have there is that from the insurance company's point of view, it's a pair, it's a pair, it's a pair, and it's nothing else. And so if you're in a polyamorous relationship, you may face the incredible decision of having to decide which of your partners you're going to identify as your spouse for the purposes of insurance. And that's a horrible choice to make. But as polyamorous family structures increase in popularity, like Michelle said at the CRA, this is something else that insurance companies are going to wind up having to grapple with.
Although I suppose someone could take out an additional policy to ensure that their person is insured. So
Yep.
I
Oh,
just I
absolutely.
do think if you live your life in an unconventional way, you might have to come up with unconventional solutions. We've got to go back to commercial, but we will be right back.